Blood pooled on the concrete driveway before the neighbors understood what was happening. The federal agents had the wrong woman, but they didn't care. They slammed the blonde nurse face first against her own truck while her daughter screamed from the porch, 9 years old and barefoot, watching her mother's wrists bleed through the handcuffs. The lead agent laughed when she asked for a warrant. He called her weak, called her nobody. Then military vehicles rolled onto that quiet suburban street, faster, darker, more dangerous than anything the feds had brought. And the man who stepped out? He saluted her. Before we dive in, I need you to do something for me. Follow this story all the way to the end, because what happens next will shock you. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story can travel. The Saturday morning sun hit Ridgemont, Colorado hard and bright, the kind of clean mountain light that made everything look deceptively peaceful. Mailboxes lined Ashford Lane in perfect suburban rows. Kids' bikes lay scattered across front lawns. Someone was grilling already, smoke drifting lazy through the air. Sarah Brennan didn't notice any of it. She was on her knees beside her rusted pickup, scrubbing dried mud off the wheel wells with a sponge that had seen better days. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Gray hoodie 2 sizes too big. Old jeans with bleach stains. She looked exactly like what she was, an exhausted ER nurse at Ridgemont General Hospital, finally getting a day off after 6 consecutive 12-hour shifts. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over while her brain stayed half asleep. Scrub, rinse, repeat. The kind of mindless task that felt therapeutic after spending the week watching people bleed out on gurneys under fluorescent lights. Behind her, the front door banged open. "Mom, can I have the tablet?" Sarah glanced over her shoulder. Her daughter Mia stood on the porch in pajamas, dark hair sticking up in every direction, looking hopeful. "Did you finish your math homework?" "Most of it." "That's a no then." Mia groaned dramatically and disappeared back inside. Through the screen door, Sarah could hear her younger son Lucas playing with toy cars in the living room, making engine noises that were way too loud for 7 in the morning. Sarah smiled despite herself and went back to scrubbing. She didn't see the black SUVs turn onto Ashford Lane. Didn't hear the engines until they were close. Too close. Moving too fast for a residential street. The kind of driving that meant something was wrong. Sarah stood up slowly, sponge dripping in her hand. 2 identical vehicles, dark-tinted windows, government plates. They rolled to a stop directly in front of her house, blocking the driveway completely. Her stomach dropped. Doors opened in sync. 4 men stepped out, dressed in tactical gear that screamed federal authority. Bulletproof vests over black uniforms, sidearms visible. The lead agent was tall, mid-40s, with a jaw that looked like it had never smiled in its life. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Sarah's brain kicked into a different gear entirely. Exits, distances, threat assessment, old instincts she thought she'd buried years ago. The lead agent walked straight toward her, not slowing, not asking permission. "Sarah Brennan?" "Yes." Her voice came out steady, calm. "Can I help you?" "You can start by putting your hands where I can see them." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Hands. Now." Sarah held up both hands, sponge still dripping. "What's this about?" "We have information that you're harboring a fugitive with ties to stolen military medical equipment. We're authorized to search the premises." For a moment, Sarah thought she'd misheard him. "You have the wrong house." Step away from the vehicle. "I'm telling you, there's nobody here but me and my kids." "Ma'am, I'm not asking again." The other agents fanned out across her lawn, moving toward her door. Sarah's chest tightened. Through the screen, she could see Lucas peering out, eyes wide. "Wait," she said, sharper now. "You can't just... Do you have a warrant?" The lead agent stopped 3 feet from her. His expression didn't change. "We don't need one." "Yes, you do." "Not when we have probable cause and an active tip about criminal activity." "There's no criminal activity here. I'm a nurse. I work at..." "We know who you are." "Then you know this is a mistake." He stepped closer, too close. Intimidation tactic. "Here's how this works. You cooperate, this goes easy. You make trouble, it goes hard. Your choice." Sarah felt the old anger rising, the kind she'd learned to bury under years of hospital bureaucracy and patient care. The kind that used to get her in trouble overseas. "I want to see identification, all of you." The lead agent smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. You don't get to make demands. Actually, I do. This is my property. Not anymore. Before she could react, he grabbed her arm and spun her around, slamming her chest first against the truck. The impact knocked the wind out of her lungs. Metal pressed cold against her cheek. Mom! Mia's scream cut through the morning air like a knife. Sarah's vision blurred. Pain shot through her shoulder, the left one, the one that had been rebuilt with pins and screws after a helicopter crash in Kandahar 7 years ago. She felt something tear deep in the scar tissue. Get your hands off me, she managed. The agent wrenched her arms behind her back. Steel cuffs bit into her wrists, clicking tight, too tight. Sarah felt skin break beneath the metal. You're making this worse on yourself, he said into her ear. Another agent was at her front door now, trying the handle. Sarah's pulse hammered. My kids are inside. They're 9 and 6. You're scaring them. Should have thought about that before you broke the law. I didn't. He yanked her away from the truck and forced her down onto her knees on the driveway. Rough concrete bit through her jeans. Blood was already running down her wrists, warm and slick. Across the street, Mr. Peterson was standing on his lawn, phone in hand. Recording. His wife beside him, hand over her mouth. Jerry, call someone, Mrs. Peterson yelled. The lead agent ignored them. He crouched beside Sarah, his face inches from hers. Where is he? Where's who? The fugitive you're hiding. I'm not hiding anyone. We have a verified tip that says otherwise. Then your tip is wrong. He stood up, brushing off his knees like she'd contaminated him. Search the house, all of it. You can't. Watch me. The other agents moved toward her door. One of them kicked it open, didn't even bother with the knob, just slammed his boot into the wood beside the lock. The frame splintered. The door swung inward. Lucas started crying immediately. Sarah tried to stand. The lead agent shoved her back down with one hand on her shoulder. Stay. They're kids. Then they'll be fine if you tell us the truth. Through the open doorway, she could hear Mia shouting, hear boots stomping through her living room, hear drawers being yanked open and dumped, the sounds of her home being torn apart. She closed her eyes and focused on breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth, combat medic breathing. The kind they taught you when everything was falling apart and you still had to keep your hands steady enough to stop someone from bleeding out. Her wrists were slick with blood now, dripping onto the concrete in dark drops that spread and pooled. A younger agent, mid-20s, nervous energy, walked over holding her wallet. He'd found it inside on the kitchen counter. Sir, there's something you should see. The lead agent took it, flipped it open. His expression didn't change. So? That's a military commendation card. I don't care if she's got a Medal of Honor. She's still a suspect. But if she served, then she knows better than to break the law. Sarah opened her eyes, looked directly at him. You came to the wrong house. We'll determine that. No. You already did. And when this is over, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you did here. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not fear, irritation, like she was an insect that refused to die. Big talk from someone on their knees. I've been in worse positions than this. Doubt that? Sarah almost smiled. Almost. You have no idea. More agents were coming out of her house now, empty-handed, looking confused. One of them shook his head at the lead agent. Nothing. The lead agent's jaw tightened. He didn't like being wrong. Check the garage, the shed, everywhere. Sir, there's nothing here. I said check. They scattered. Sarah stayed on her knees, watching her neighbors gather on the sidewalk. More phones out now. More recording. She could see the Johnsons from 3 houses down, the Reyes family across the street, old Mr. Carver from the corner lot. All of them staring, all of them witnesses. The lead agent paced in front of her, radiating frustration. His perfect operation was falling apart, and he knew it. Where did you serve? Sarah didn't answer. I asked you a question, and I'm choosing not to answer. He crouched again, getting in her face. You think you're tough? You think this attitude is helping you? I think you're scared. Of what? Of being wrong. His hand moved toward his weapon, not drawing it, just touching it. A threat. Careful. Or what? You'll shoot an unarmed woman on her knees in front of 20 witnesses? I'll do what's necessary. No. Sarah's voice dropped lower, colder. You'll do what you're told, because that's all you know how to do. His face went red. Behind him, one of the younger agents was looking increasingly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Sir, maybe you should shut up and do your job. Mia appeared in the broken doorway, Lucas clinging to her leg. Her face was streaked with tears, but her expression was pure fury, the same fury Sarah saw in the mirror sometimes. Leave my mom alone. The lead agent didn't even look at her. Get back inside. No. Kid, I'm warning you. Sir. The nervous young agent was at his elbow now, voice urgent. We need to stop, right now. Excuse me? That commendation card, I looked her up on the database. She's not just military, she's… Whatever he was about to say got cut off by the sound of engines. Different engines, heavier. Sarah heard them before she saw them, that distinctive rumble of military vehicles moving fast, the kind of sound that bypassed your conscious brain and went straight to your survival instincts. The lead agent stood up, frowning. What the hell? 3 vehicles rolled onto Ashford Lane from the opposite end. Not civilian SUVs pretending to be tactical. Real military transport, dark green, armor plating, the kind of trucks that move through war zones. They stopped in a line across the street, blocking both ends of the block. Doors opened. Personnel stepped out, 8 of them, moving with the kind of synchronized precision that made the federal agents look like amateurs playing dress-up. Full combat gear, weapons visible but not raised. Their body language screamed professional violence held on a very tight leash. The lead agent's hand went to his sidearm. Who the hell are you? Nobody answered him. A 9th man emerged from the center vehicle. Older, maybe 55, with iron gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. Colonel's insignia on his uniform. He walked past the federal agents like they were furniture, his attention locked on Sarah. Then he stopped directly in front of her and saluted. The entire street went silent. Sarah, still on her knees with blood running down her wrists, stared up at him. Recognition hit her like a punch to the chest. Colonel Mathis! Captain Brennan. His voice was rough, measured, with the weight of absolute authority behind it. He held the salute for a long moment before lowering his hand. Then he turned to face the lead federal agent, and his expression went arctic. You want to explain why one of my soldiers is bleeding on her own driveway? The agent's face had gone pale. Your soldier? That's what I said. She's a civilian, a nurse. We have intelligence that… You have nothing. Mathis's voice didn't rise, but somehow it got louder anyway, filling the space. What you have is a catastrophic failure of basic operational protocol. We followed procedure. You assaulted a decorated combat veteran based on an unverified tip. No warrant, no probable cause, no legal justification. In front of her minor children and half her neighborhood. Mathis gestured at the phone still recording. And you did it on camera. We had reason to believe it. You had nothing. Check your database again. Her file is classified. The younger agent who'd tried to warn his superior was already on his phone, fingers flying. His face went from pale to gray. Sir, oh God, sir, she's what? The lead agent snapped. The young agent's hand was shaking. She's Captain Sarah Brennan, former combat trauma specialist attached to the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment. 3 tours, 17 classified medical evacuation missions. She's credited with saving over 40 lives in combat situations, including… He stopped, reading something that made him look sick. Including Senator Morrison's son, and General Vasquez, and… Jesus Christ, half the command structure owes her. The lead agent stood frozen. Colonel Mathis smiled, but it was the kind of smile that meant someone's career was about to end. You picked the wrong woman. Behind them, more vehicles were arriving. Civilian this time, but official. News vans, local police, someone had made calls. This was spiraling beyond anyone's control now. One of Mathis's personnel moved forward with a medical kit, kneeling beside Sarah. Captain, I'm going to remove those cuffs. About time, Sarah muttered. The cuffs clicked open. Blood immediately flowed faster from where they'd cut into her wrists. The medic started cleaning the wounds with efficient, practiced movements. Mathis reached down, offering Sarah his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Her legs were unsteady, adrenaline crash hitting hard, but she stayed upright through sheer stubbornness. "You good?" Mathis asked quietly. "I've had worse days." "I remember." Something almost like warmth flickered in his eyes. "Kandahar. Don't remind me." He turned back to the federal agents, and the warmth vanished. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stand exactly where you are while internal affairs and JAG officers arrive. You're going to surrender your badges, your weapons, and your authority, and then you're going to pray that the legal system is more merciful than I'd be." "You can't." "I can, and I will." Mathis pulled out his phone. "I have the Secretary of Defense on speed dial. Want me to conference you in?" The lead agent's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Mia came running across the lawn and threw herself at Sarah, wrapping her arms around her mother's waist. Lucas followed, moving slower, still crying. Sarah pulled them both close with her bandaged hands, ignoring the pain. "It's okay. It's over." "They broke our door," Lucas sobbed. "We'll fix it." "They were mean to you." "I know, baby, but I'm okay." Across the street, Mr. Peterson was still recording, but now he was also on his phone, talking rapidly to someone. Mrs. Reyes was doing the same. The whole neighborhood had mobilized. More official vehicles kept arriving. An internal affairs van, local news crews setting up cameras. A police supervisor who took one look at the scene and immediately started separating people for statements. Colonel Mathis stayed beside Sarah, a solid presence that radiated barely controlled fury. "I'm sorry we didn't get here faster. Soon as Jerry Peterson recognized your tattoo and called the base, we moved. But we should have been faster." Sarah shook her head. "You came. That's enough." "It's not." He looked at the federal agents being corralled by military police. Not even close. The lead agent was arguing with someone now, his voice rising, trying to salvage what was left of his authority. But nobody was listening anymore. His team was being separated, questioned, documented. The perfect tactical operation had become a public relations nightmare in under 10 minutes. A woman in a suit approached, FBI, based on her credentials. She looked furious. "Who authorized this operation?" The lead agent pointed at her. "You don't have jurisdiction." "I do now." She held up her phone, showing an official order. "As of 5 minutes ago, this entire incident is under federal investigation. Civil rights violations, unlawful detention, excessive force, falsification of intelligence reports." Her eyes went cold. "And that's just the beginning." Sarah watched it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. Her wrists throbbed. Her shoulders screamed. Her kids were still shaking against her. But underneath all of that, something else was building. Not satisfaction. Certainty. She'd been underestimated her entire career. Too young, too blonde, too soft-spoken. People looked at her and saw weakness. Saw someone who could be pushed around, dismissed. They never saw what she'd done. What she was capable of. What she'd survived. The lead agent was being led toward a vehicle now, hands behind his back, finally on the receiving end of the treatment he'd dished out. He caught Sarah's eye as he passed. She didn't look away. Didn't smile. Just watched him until he was gone. "Mom?" Mia's voice was small. "What happens now?" Sarah looked down at her daughter, at both her kids actually, their faces still scared but starting to relax now that the immediate danger had passed. "How did you explain this to children? How did you tell them that the people who were supposed to protect them had become the threat?" "Now we go inside," Sarah said finally. "We clean up. We fix what's broken." She glanced at Colonel Mathis. "And we make sure this never happens to anyone else." Mathis nodded slowly. "Count on it." But even as she said it, Sarah knew the truth. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The agents might be detained, investigations might be opened, but there was a whole system behind them. A machine that had allowed this to happen, that had let a handful of men storm into a quiet neighborhood and terrorize a family based on nothing but an anonymous phone call. That machine was still running, and Sarah had just become its biggest problem. She walked toward her broken front door, kids pressed against her sides, Colonel Mathis following a respectful distance behind. The news cameras tracked her movement. Every phone on the street was still recording. Good. Let them watch. Let them see what happened when you pushed someone too far, when you mistook exhaustion for weakness, when you looked at a woman in scrubs and forgot to ask what she'd done before she put them on. The blood on her driveway was already drying in the morning sun, dark stains spreading across the concrete like proof. Evidence. A permanent reminder that they'd chosen the wrong target. Inside her house, furniture was overturned, drawers dumped, family photos knocked off walls. Her home had been violated as thoroughly as her rights. Sarah stood in the center of the chaos and felt something cold and focused settle into her chest. They'd wanted to make her afraid. Instead, they'd made her dangerous. Colonel Mathis stepped through the broken door frame and surveyed the damage with the expression of someone documenting evidence for a war crimes tribunal. His jaw worked silently. When he finally spoke, his voice was low enough that only Sarah could hear it. They're going to try to bury this. Sarah was already picking up scattered photographs from the floor. Mia's kindergarten portrait, Lucas at his soccer game, an old picture of her in uniform that had been ripped from its frame. Let them try. I'm serious. The people who authorized this operation won't go down without a fight. Good. She set the photos on the overturned coffee table. Neither will I. Mathis watched her for a moment, then nodded. He'd seen that look before. Baghdad, 2019, when a dust storm had grounded their evac birds and Sarah had kept 3 critically wounded soldiers alive in a crumbling safe house for 18 hours straight. She'd looked exactly like this then, exhausted, bleeding, and absolutely immovable. Outside, car doors slammed, voices rose and fell. The media circus was setting up camp on Ashford Lane, and it wasn't going anywhere soon. Mia tugged on Sarah's sleeve. Mom, they took my tablet. What? The agents. They took it from my room. They said it was evidence. Sarah's hands clenched. She forced them to relax. We'll get it back. They also broke my lamp, the one Grandma gave me. Lucas was crying again, quieter now, the kind of exhausted sobbing that came after too much fear. Sarah pulled him onto her lap despite the pain in her shoulder, despite the bandages on her wrists that were already starting to bleed through. A police officer appeared in the doorway. Local, not federal. Young guy, maybe late 20s, looking deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. Ma'am, the FBI liaison wants to get your statement. Tell them I'll give it when I'm ready. They're saying it needs to be now, while everything's fresh. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. The officer took an involuntary step backward. I just watched federal agents terrorize my children and assault me on my own property. My wrists are still bleeding. My house is destroyed. My daughter's lamp is broken. So when I say I'll give a statement when I'm ready, that's exactly what I mean. The officer swallowed. Yes, ma'am. I'll let them know. He disappeared. Mathis made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. You haven't changed. Neither have you. Sarah shifted Lucas to her other knee, trying to find a position that didn't make her shoulders scream. How'd you even know where I was? I didn't. Not until Jerry Peterson called the base in a panic. Said some federal agents were beating up his neighbor who had a 161st SOAR tattoo on her shoulder. Mathis leaned against the wall, careful not to touch anything that might be evidence. I pulled up your file. Saw you'd separated 4 years ago, settled in Ridgemont, working as a civilian nurse. Figured you wanted to be left alone. I did. So why'd they come after you? Sarah shook her head. No idea. They kept saying I was hiding a fugitive, someone connected to stolen medical supplies. But I don't know anyone who fits that description. What about from your time in service? Mathis, everyone I served with is accounted for. You know that. The unit's tight. Nobody goes AWOL. He rubbed his jaw, thinking. Then someone fed them false intelligence. The question is why? Before Sarah could respond, a woman in a sharp gray suit walked through the broken door without knocking. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back severe, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Sarah's truck. She took in the scene with quick, assessing eyes. Captain Brennan? I'm Margaret Voss, attorney. She handed Sarah a business card. I represent the Military Veterans Legal Defense Foundation. We'd like to offer you our services. I didn't ask for an attorney. No, but you're going to need one. Voss set her briefcase on the overturned coffee table and clicked it open. This situation is about to get very complicated very fast. The agents who did this are already lawyering up. Their department is circling the wagons, and there's going to be a lot of pressure to make this go away quietly. Sarah looked at the card. Embossed lettering, prestigious firm name. I can't afford you. We work pro bono for cases like this, high-profile civil rights violations involving veterans. Voss pulled out a legal pad. And trust me, this is about to become very high profile. As if on cue, Sarah's phone started ringing, then Mathis's, then the landline that Sarah barely remembered existed, all of them at once, a cacophony of electronic noise that made Lucas clap his hands over his ears. Voss didn't even blink. That would be the media. They have your number now. It's going to be like this for a while. Sarah felt a headache building behind her eyes. What do you want me to do? Right now, nothing. Let me handle the legal response. You focus on your kids and getting your house back in order. Voss glanced at Mia and Lucas. They've been through enough. Mom, I'm hungry, Mia said quietly. Sarah checked her watch. Almost noon. They'd been trapped in this nightmare for 3 hours, but it felt like 3 days. Okay, let's see what's left in the kitchen. The kitchen was worse than the living room. Every cabinet hung open, contents dumped, cereal boxes ripped open and spilled. The refrigerator door left ajar, milk spoiling on the counter. They'd even gone through her trash, scattering garbage across the linoleum. Sarah stared at the mess and felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, hardening. We'll order pizza, she said. Mia's face brightened a little. Can we get extra cheese? Yeah, baby, extra cheese. While Sarah dug through the chaos to find her phone charger, Voss was already on her cell, speaking in rapid-fire legal terminology to someone on the other end. Mathis had stepped outside to coordinate with his personnel, making sure the scene stayed secured and documented. Sarah finally found her phone under an overturned chair. 73 missed calls, hundreds of texts, her voicemail was full. Most of the messages were from reporters. A few were from coworkers at the hospital asking if she was okay. One was from her supervisor, Dr. Hammond, his voice tight with concern. Sarah, I saw the news. Take all the time you need. Your job's not going anywhere. She deleted that one and immediately felt guilty about it. Hammond was a good boss. He deserved better than her anger, but right now she didn't have anything else to give. The pizza arrived 40 minutes later, delivered by a teenager who took one look at the military vehicles and news vans and practically threw the boxes at Sarah before sprinting back to his car. Sarah paid with cash she'd found in her jeans pocket, miraculously still there after the agents had searched her. They ate on the floor of the living room because all the furniture was overturned and she didn't have the energy to fix it yet. Lucas ate 3 slices and fell asleep against her side, exhausted from crying. Mia picked at her food, unusually quiet. Is this going to happen again? Mia asked finally. Sarah set down her own half-eaten slice. No. How do you know? Because I won't let it. Mia studied her mother's face with the kind of solemn intensity only 9-year-olds could manage. The colonel called you captain. That's what I was, before you were born. Were you a doctor? Not exactly. I fixed people who got hurt, kept them alive until they could get to a hospital. Like a superhero? Sarah almost smiled. No, baby, just a soldier doing her job. The agents were scared of you. They were scared of getting in trouble. No. Mia shook her head. They were scared of you. I saw it. When the colonel came and he saluted you, that mean agent looked like he wanted to run away. Sarah didn't know what to say to that. The truth was complicated. Yes, she'd been good at her job. Yes, she'd saved lives under impossible conditions, but being good at keeping people alive in war zones didn't make you a superhero. It made you someone who'd seen things they could never unsee. Someone who woke up at night hearing helicopters that weren't there. Someone who couldn't watch medical dramas on TV because the sound effects were all wrong and it made her hands shake. Mom? Mia pressed. Are you going to fight them? Sarah looked at her daughter, really looked at her, at the fear still lingering in her eyes, at the way she kept glancing toward the broken door like more agents might come through at any moment. Yeah, Sarah said quietly. I'm going to fight them. Good. Margaret Voss appeared in the doorway, phone still pressed to her ear. She covered the microphone. Sarah, we need to talk. Now. Sarah carefully moved Lucas's sleeping head onto a couch cushion and stood up. Her legs had gone stiff from sitting on the floor. Everything hurt. Voss led her to the kitchen, out of earshot from Mia. I just got off the phone with the FBI's Internal Affairs Division. They want to interview you tomorrow morning. Okay. It's not okay. They're already building a narrative. The lead agent, his name is Derek Paulson, by the way, is claiming you were combative and threatening, that he had no choice but to restrain you for officer safety. Sarah's laugh was sharp and humorless. I was cleaning my truck. I know, but he's got 3 other agents backing his story. And they're going to argue that the anonymous tip they received was credible enough to warrant immediate action. Without a warrant, they'll claim exigent circumstances, imminent danger, time-sensitive intelligence. Voss flipped through her legal pad. It's garbage, but it's the argument they're going with. And if we're not careful, they'll spin this into a story where you're the problem, not them. How do I stop that? By being smarter than they are, by documenting everything, by not giving them any ammunition. Voss looked Sarah dead in the eye, and by not talking to anyone, media, police, federal agents, nobody without me present. The FBI wants a statement. They can wait. Right now you need medical attention, real medical attention, not field dressing. Voss gestured at Sarah's wrists. Those bandages are soaked through. You need to go to the ER, get properly treated, and have every injury photographed and documented by an independent medical examiner. I work in the ER. I can handle it. Sarah. Voss's voice went hard. This isn't about what you can handle. This is about building a case so airtight that they have no choice but to admit what they did. Every injury on your body is evidence. Every photograph is ammunition. Do you understand? Sarah understood. She just didn't like it. The idea of treating her own assault as a legal strategy made her feel sick. But Voss was right. If she wanted justice, real justice, not just performative apologies, she had to be strategic. Fine, I'll go. Good. Colonel Mathis already offered to have a military medical unit transport you. That way there's no question about chain of custody for the evidence. Sarah nodded. Her wrists were throbbing now, a deep ache that spread up her forearms. The adrenaline that had kept her going for the last few hours was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion and pain. Mathis arranged for 2 of his personnel to stay with Mia and Lucas while Sarah was gone. The soldiers, both women, both mothers themselves, promised to keep the kids safe and help clean up the house. Mia looked uncertain, but Lucas was already showing one of them his toy cars, the trauma temporarily forgotten in the way only young children could manage. The ride to Ridgemont General took 20 minutes. Sarah sat in the back of the military medical vehicle, watching her neighborhood disappear through the tinted windows. The news vans were multiplying. Local had turned into national. She recognized logos from major networks. How bad is it out there? She asked the medic sitting across from her. The young man, specialist rank, maybe 23, glanced at his phone. Trending number 2 on social media. The video of you on the driveway has 4 million views and counting. Sarah closed her eyes. 4 million people had watched her get brutalized. 4 million strangers had seen her daughter screaming from the porch. The violation felt fresh all over again. For what it's worth, ma'am, the specialist added quietly, everyone's on your side. I've been reading the comments. People are furious. Fury doesn't fix my door. No, but it makes it harder for them to sweep this under the rug. He had a point. Sarah had spent 4 years trying to live quietly, trying to leave the military behind and build something normal for her kids. But normal was gone now, shattered the moment those SUVs rolled onto her street. The ER entrance was blocked by more news crews. Hospital security had set up barricades, but reporters were shouting questions anyway, cameras flashing like strobe lights. Sarah kept her head down and let the military personnel shield her as they moved through the chaos. Inside, Dr. Hammond was waiting personally. His face looked 10 years older than it had yesterday. Sarah, Jesus Christ. He reached for her, then stopped, unsure if touch was welcome. Are you okay? Been better? I saw the video. We all saw it. Hammond gestured toward the nurses' station, where several of Sarah's co-workers were watching with expressions ranging from horror to rage. Come on, I'm treating you myself. They set her up in a private exam room, away from the main ER, where patients and staff could gawk. Hammond worked in silence, cleaning and rebandaging her wrists with the kind of precise care he usually reserved for complicated lacerations. The cuts were deep. The cuffs had sliced through skin down to muscle in places. These are going to scar, Hammond said finally. Add them to the collection. He moved to her shoulder next, the one the agent had wrenched when he slammed her against the truck. Hammond's fingers probed gently, professionally. Sarah hissed in pain. The surgical repair is compromised, he said. Some of the scar tissue tore. You're going to need imaging to see how bad it is. Can it wait? Sarah, can it wait? Hammond sat back, studying her. Why are you in such a hurry? Because I have 2 kids at home who just watched federal agents destroy their sense of safety. Because I have a lawsuit to file and statements to give. Because every minute I spend in this hospital is a minute I'm not fighting back. Fighting back how? However I can. Hammond stood up and walked to the small sink in the corner, washing his hands with methodical precision. When he spoke again, his voice was measured. I've known you for 4 years. You're one of the best nurses I've ever worked with. Calm under pressure. Excellent instincts. Never complains. Never cuts corners. He dried his hands and turned to face her. But you're also one of the most stubborn people I've ever met. And right now, that stubbornness is going to hurt you if you don't slow down. I can't slow down. You have to. Because if you burn yourself out in the first 24 hours, you'll have nothing left when this really gets ugly. And Sarah, it's going to get ugly. Sarah knew he was right, but knowing something and doing something were different things entirely. The hospital photographer came in next, documenting every injury in clinical detail. The cuts on her wrists, the bruising on her shoulder, the scrapes on her knees from being forced onto the concrete, the swelling on her face where Paulson had slammed her against the truck. Each flash of the camera felt like another violation. Another way her body was being used as evidence in a fight she never asked for. By the time they finished, it was almost 5 in the evening. Sarah had been awake for over 30 hours. She'd worked a night shift before coming home to clean her truck, and exhaustion was pulling at her like gravity. Margaret Voss was waiting in the hallway when Sarah finally emerged. Good. You're done. Now we go to my office and prepare your statement. Can it wait until tomorrow? No, the FBI is already spinning the narrative. We need to get ahead of it. Voss checked her phone. I've scheduled a press conference for 8 tomorrow morning. You don't have to speak if you don't want to, but you need to be there. Let people see your injuries. Let them see that you're real. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to go home, curl up with her kids, and pretend the world didn't exist. But that wasn't an option anymore. Fine, your office, but I need to check on Mia and Lucas first. Already arranged. Colonel Mathis has them at a secure location off base, somewhere the media can't find them. They're safe. The relief was so intense it made Sarah's knees weak. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We've got a long fight ahead. Voss's office was downtown, tucked into a building that screamed expensive legal representation. Floor-to-ceiling windows, mahogany furniture, original artwork on the walls. Sarah felt deeply out of place in her blood-stained jeans and borrowed hospital sweater. They spent 3 hours going over every detail of the morning, every word Paulson had said, every action his team had taken. Voss recorded everything, taking notes in precise shorthand. Did he ever identify himself properly? Voss asked. He showed a badge. Didn't say what agency. Did he read you your rights? No. Did he explain why you were being detained? Just kept saying I was harboring a fugitive. Never gave me details. Voss made another note. And the warrant? He said they didn't need one. Said something about probable cause, which is legally questionable even under the best circumstances. And these were not the best circumstances. Voss flipped to a new page. Okay, let's talk about your military service. Sarah's hands clenched. What about it? I need to know what I'm working with. Your record is partially classified, but I have clearance. I've seen the basics. 3 tours, 17 successful medical evacuations, multiple commendations. But I need to hear it from you. What did you actually do over there? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She'd spent 4 years not talking about this, not thinking about it. Building a wall between Captain Sarah Brennan and the civilian nurse who picked her kids up from school and worried about parent-teacher conferences. I kept people alive, she said finally. That's all. It's not all. You were embedded with special operations. You went into hot zones under fire. You performed battlefield surgery in conditions that would make most doctors quit. I did my job. Sarah. Voss set down her pen. I'm not asking you to relitigate your trauma, but I need you to understand something. Your military service is going to be central to this case. The public is going to want to know who you are, what you've done, why assaulting you is different from assaulting a random civilian. It's not different. Legally, you're right. Morally, you're right. But optics matter, and the optics of federal agents brutalizing a decorated combat veteran are significantly worse than them brutalizing someone with no military connection. Sarah hated that Voss was right. Hated that her service, something she'd tried so hard to leave behind, was now the most valuable currency she had. Fine. What do you want to know? They talked for another hour. Voss asked questions Sarah hadn't answered in years. About the missions, the casualties, the nights when evacuation birds couldn't fly and she'd had to keep wounded soldiers alive with nothing but a medical kit and pure determination. By the time they finished, Sarah felt hollowed out, empty, like she'd bled all over Voss's expensive carpet and nobody had noticed. One more thing, Voss said as Sarah stood to leave. The FBI is going to offer you a settlement. Probably soon. Probably a lot of money. Good. Don't take it. Sarah stopped. What? They're going to want this to go away quietly. They'll offer you enough money that most people would take it and disappear. But if you settle, Paulson walks. His team walks. The system that allowed this to happen stays intact. Voss stood up, meeting Sarah's eyes. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You have kids to think about, but I want you to understand what's at stake. Sarah thought about Mia asking if this would happen again, about Lucas crying into her shoulder, about every other family this could happen to if nothing changed. I'm not settling, she said. Voss smiled. Good, because we're about to make their lives very difficult. The military vehicle took Sarah to the secure location where Mathis was keeping her kids. It turned out to be a small house on the edge of the base, temporary quarters usually reserved for visiting officers. Mia and Lucas were asleep in one of the bedrooms, curled up together under a blanket that wasn't theirs. Sarah stood in the doorway watching them breathe. Mathis appeared beside her, quiet as a ghost. They ate dinner, he said softly. Watched some cartoons. Asked about you every 10 minutes. Thank you for this. Don't thank me. I should have been there faster this morning. His jaw tightened. If I'd known... You couldn't have known. I should have. We're supposed to take care of our own. Sarah looked at him. Really looked at him. Mathis had aged since she'd last seen him. More gray hair, deeper lines around his eyes. But the intensity was the same. That burning focus that made him one of the most effective commanders she'd ever served under. What happened this morning isn't on you, she said. Maybe not, but what happens next is. He pulled out his phone, showing her a news article. The headline read, Decorated Veteran Assaulted by Federal Agents in Own Driveway. Below it, a photograph of Sarah on her knees, blood visible on her wrists, Mia screaming from the porch. Sarah's stomach twisted. It's everywhere, Mathis continued. Every major outlet. Social media is on fire. There are already protests organizing outside the federal building. Members of Congress are demanding investigations. He pocketed the phone. This isn't just about you anymore. It's become something bigger. I didn't want bigger. Nobody ever does. But here we are. Sarah moved away from the bedroom door, not wanting to wake the kids. Mathis followed her to the small living room. Through the window, she could see military police patrolling the perimeter. Even here, surrounded by armed personnel on a secure base, she didn't feel entirely safe. Voss thinks they'll try to settle, Sarah said. They will. They're terrified of this going to trial. She says I shouldn't take it. She's right. Mathis sat down heavily on the couch. You settle. Paulson gets away with it. Maybe gets fired, maybe doesn't. But he definitely doesn't face real consequences. And the next time someone decides to raid a house without proper authorization, they'll remember that the system protected their predecessors. And if I don't settle, if I fight, then it gets messy, drawn out, expensive. The media will pick apart every detail of your life. Paulson's lawyers will try to make you look unstable, dangerous, someone who deserved what happened. They'll dig into your military record, your medical history, your personal relationships. They'll find every mistake you've ever made and blow it up on national television. Sarah sat down beside him. You're not exactly selling this. I'm being honest, because you need to know what you're signing up for. Mathis turned to look at her. But I also know you. I know you don't back down. Not when it matters. So whatever you decide, I'm behind you. The whole unit is. We don't forget our own. Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop making trouble or next time your kids won't just watch. Sarah stared at the screen. Ice flooded her veins. Mathis saw her expression and took the phone from her shaking hands. His face went dark. We need to report this. To who? The FBI? Sarah laughed bitterly. They're the ones who did this in the first place. Local police, then. Someone. It won't matter. These people know where I live, where my kids go to school. Sarah stood up, pacing. I thought if I just stayed quiet, lived small, nobody would bother us. But I was wrong. They came anyway. Sarah? They came into my home, Mathis. They terrorized my children, and now they're threatening to do it again if I don't shut up and disappear. Which is exactly why you can't. Sarah stopped pacing. What? If you back down now, you're telling them they can get away with it, that threats work, that fear works. Mathis stood up, crossing to her. I've seen you work under fire. I've seen you hold it together when everything was falling apart. This is just a different kind of battlefield. I'm not a soldier anymore. Aren't you? Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to say that she'd left that life behind, that she was just a nurse now, just a mom, just someone trying to survive in a world that kept trying to crush her. But the anger in her chest said otherwise. The threat on her phone said otherwise. Mia's broken lamp and Lucas's tears and her own blood drying on the driveway said otherwise. They picked the wrong person, Sarah said quietly. Mathis smiled. Yeah, they really did. The press conference started at 8 sharp in a downtown conference room packed beyond capacity. Cameras lined the back wall 3 deep. Reporters occupied every seat and stood shoulder to shoulder along the sides. The energy felt electric and dangerous, like everyone knew they were watching something explode in real time. Sarah sat at the long table between Margaret Voss and Colonel Mathis, her bandaged wrists visible under the harsh lights. She'd chosen her clothes carefully. Simple black sweater, jeans, no makeup. Let them see exactly what Paulson and his team had done. Voss started with a prepared statement, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. She laid out the facts methodically. The lack of warrant, the excessive force, the terrorizing of minor children, the deliberate assault on a decorated veteran. Every sentence was calculated to make the federal agents look worse. Then she opened the floor to questions. The chaos was immediate. Captain Brennan, how are your children handling this? Sarah leaned toward the microphone. They're scared, confused. They don't understand why people who are supposed to protect us tried to hurt us instead. Do you have any idea why you were targeted? None. The agents claimed I was hiding a fugitive, but they never provided evidence, never showed documentation. They just assumed I was guilty and acted accordingly. Agent Paulson is saying you were combative and threatening. I was cleaning my truck. Sarah's voice stayed level. I never raised my voice, never made a threatening gesture. I asked to see a warrant, and he laughed in my face. More questions came rapid fire. Sarah answered them as directly as she could, following Voss's coaching from the night before. Stay calm. Stay factual. Let the truth speak for itself. Then someone from the back shouted, Is it true you received a death threat last night? The room went silent. Voss leaned forward. We are not commenting on ongoing security matters. But there was a threat? Next question. But the damage was done. Every reporter in the room was already typing furiously. The story had just gotten bigger. After the press conference, Voss hustled Sarah out through a side exit where a car was waiting. They'd anticipated the media would try to follow, and they were right. 3 news vans immediately pulled out behind them. That went well, Voss said, checking her phone. You came across exactly how we needed. Sympathetic but strong. Victim but not weak. Sarah stared out the window. I hate this. I know, but it's working. My contacts in the FBI say there's panic at the highest levels. The director himself is getting involved. Good. Sarah, when they offer the settlement, and they will, it's going to be substantial. Life-changing money. Enough to relocate, start over, give your kids opportunities you couldn't afford otherwise. Sarah didn't respond. I need to know you're committed to seeing this through, Voss pressed. Because once we file the lawsuit, there's no going back. They're going to come at you with everything they have. Let them. They arrived at Voss's office to find it surrounded by more press. Security had to clear a path to get them inside. Upstairs, Voss's paralegal team had already prepared the initial filing documents. Sarah spent the next 2 hours signing her name over and over while lawyers explained legal terminology she barely understood. The lawsuit named Paulson and his 3 team members individually, plus the federal agency that employed them, plus the supervisors who'd authorized the operation. It sought damages for civil rights violations, emotional distress, unlawful detention, assault, and a dozen other charges Sarah lost track of. "This is going to get ugly," one of Voss's partners warned. "They're going to dig into everything, your finances, your service record, your personal relationships. Any skeletons in your closet will come out." "I don't have skeletons." "Everyone has something." Sarah thought about that later, sitting in yet another secure location while Mathis coordinated protection details. Did she have secrets? Things she'd buried and hoped would stay hidden? The helicopter crash that had destroyed her shoulder and killed 2 pilots. The 16-hour surgery session in Kandahar, where she'd lost 3 patients despite doing everything right. The nightmares that still woke her up sometimes, soaked in sweat and reaching for medical supplies that weren't there. But those weren't secrets. They were scars. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Sarah almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Captain Brennan?" A woman's voice, professional but strained. "This is Agent Lisa Cortez, FBI Internal Affairs. I need to speak with you about the incident." "My lawyer said—" "I know what your lawyer said, but you need to hear this. Can we meet? Somewhere private?" Sarah looked at Mathis, who was watching her intently. She put the phone on speaker. "I'm listening," Sarah said. "Not over the phone. There are things about this case." Cortez paused. "Derek Paulson isn't working alone. The operation against you is part of something bigger, something we've been investigating for months. And if you want real justice, you need to know what you're actually fighting." Sarah felt Mathis tense beside her. "When and where?" "Tonight, 10 o'clock. There's a diner on Highway 34 just outside Ridgemont. Come alone." "No." "Captain, I'm not going anywhere alone. My attorney comes with me, or we don't meet." A long pause. "Fine, but nobody else. No military escort, no press. This stays quiet or people die." The line went dead. Mathis was already shaking his head. "Absolutely not. This could be a setup. Or it could be legitimate. Or it could be Paulson's friends trying to shut you up permanently." Voss, who'd been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. "If it's legitimate, we need to hear what she has to say. If the federal investigation has uncovered a pattern of abuse, if it's a trap, Sarah ends up dead in a ditch. Then we take precautions." Voss pulled out her phone. "I'll have my firm's security team position assets near the location, close enough to respond, far enough not to spook Cortez. And I'll notify local police that we'll be in the area." Sarah was already standing. "I'm going." "Sarah," Mathis started. "I'm going," she repeated, harder this time. "Because if Cortez is telling the truth, if Paulson has done this to other people, then this isn't just about me anymore. And I need to know." The diner was exactly the kind of place where important meetings happened in movies and nowhere else. Isolated, half empty, with a waitress who looked like she'd stopped caring about anything years ago. Sarah and Voss arrived early, taking a booth in the back where they could see both entrances. Cortez showed up at 10 exactly. She was younger than Sarah expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that looked exhausted. She slid into the booth across from them without ordering anything. "Thank you for coming." "Talk," Voss said flatly. Cortez glanced around, then pulled out a tablet. "Everything I'm about to show you is classified. Technically, I could lose my badge just for having this conversation. But I'm done watching innocent people get destroyed while the system protects itself." She turned the tablet toward them. The screen showed a list of names, dates, locations. Sarah recognized the format: operational reports. "Derek Paulson has been running tactical operations for 7 years, Cortez began. During that time, his team has conducted over 40 residential raids. 23 of those raids resulted in no arrests. 15 involved excessive force complaints. 8 families filed lawsuits. Every single lawsuit was settled quietly with NDAs attached." Sarah felt ice spreading through her chest. "How many were based on fake tips?" "We don't know yet, but at least half the operations used anonymous intelligence that couldn't be verified. Paulson's supervisor, Agent Mark Hendricks, rubber-stamped every single one without proper vetting." Voss was taking notes furiously. Why wasn't this caught earlier? Because the system is designed to protect itself. Internal affairs investigations get buried. Complaints disappear. Settlements include clauses preventing victims from speaking publicly. Cortez's hands clenched around the tablet. I've been trying to build a case for 18 months, but every time I get close, evidence vanishes. Witnesses recant. Files get classified. So why tell us now? Because you're different. You have military support, media attention, public sympathy. You can't be disappeared like the others. Cortez leaned forward. And because what happened to you wasn't random, you were targeted specifically. Sarah's blood went cold. What? Cortez swiped to a different screen. 3 weeks ago, someone with access to federal databases ran searches on your name, your address, your military service record. Those searches originated from within Paulson's unit. Why would they target me? That's what I can't figure out. You have no criminal record, no suspicious associations. You're just a nurse living quietly with her kids. Cortez shook her head. Unless someone wanted to make an example of you, show that even decorated veterans aren't safe from federal authority. Voss's pen had stopped moving. You're saying this was a message. I'm saying the anonymous tip that triggered your raid was manufactured. There never was a fugitive. There never was stolen medical equipment. Someone created a fake intelligence report specifically to justify going after you. Sarah couldn't breathe. The betrayal was too massive to process. She'd spent 4 years building a quiet life, staying under the radar, trying to be normal. And someone had decided to destroy that anyway. Who? She managed. I don't know yet, but whoever it was has high-level access. This wasn't some random field agent. This was someone with authority. The waitress appeared with coffee nobody had ordered. They waited in tense silence until she left. What do you need from me? Sarah asked finally. Testimony, cooperation, help building a case that can't be buried. Cortez's eyes were intense. If we can prove Paulson and Hendricks have been running a pattern of illegal operations with institutional knowledge and approval, we can bring down the entire corrupt structure. But it requires you to be willing to testify in detail about everything that happened, every word, every action, no matter how painful. I'm willing. It gets worse. They're going to come after you hard, discredit you, destroy your reputation, make you wish you'd taken the settlement and disappeared. Sarah thought about the text message, the threat against her kids, the blood on her driveway, and the fear in Mia's eyes. Let them try. Cortez handed over a business card with a different number on it. This is a secure line. Use it if anything happens. And Sarah, she paused. Watch your back. These people have already shown they don't care about rules or consequences. After Cortez left, Sarah and Voss sat in silence for a long moment. This changes everything, Voss said finally. If we can prove systematic corruption, this becomes a federal civil rights case with criminal implications. We're not just suing a few bad agents. We're exposing institutional rot. Good. Sarah, you understand what this means. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for every person Paulson and his team have brutalized, every family they've terrorized. That's a heavy burden. Sarah looked at her bandaged wrists, thought about all the soldiers she'd saved who'd never thanked her, never even known her name. Thought about doing what was right even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. I can carry it. The next morning, Voss filed an amended complaint expanding the lawsuit to include allegations of systematic civil rights violations and demanding a full federal investigation into Paulson's entire operational history. The news broke like a bomb. By noon, 3 more families had come forward with stories of similar raids. By evening, it was 7. All of them with the same pattern: anonymous tips, no warrants, excessive force, quiet settlements that kept them silent. Until now. Sarah spent the day giving interviews carefully coordinated by Voss. Each one was calculated to build public pressure, to make it impossible for the system to sweep this under the rug. She talked about her children's nightmares, about Mia refusing to sleep alone, about Lucas flinching every time a car door slammed outside. The public response was overwhelming. Protests erupted outside FBI field offices in 3 cities. Congressional representatives demanded hearings. The hashtag justice. For Brennan trended worldwide for 18 hours straight. But with visibility came danger. That night, while Sarah was staying in another secure location with Mathis standing guard, Someone threw a brick through the window of her actual house back on Ashford Lane. The brick had a note attached: "Drop the lawsuit, or we drop you." Local police secured the scene, but everyone knew it was theater. Whoever had done this wasn't some random vandal. This was escalation. A promise. Mathis wanted to move Sarah and the kids out of state entirely. Voss argued for increasing security but staying visible. Sarah just wanted her children to stop being afraid. "How long does this go on?" she asked Mathis late that night, both of them too wired to sleep. "As long as it takes." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." Mathis was cleaning his sidearm, the repetitive motion clearly helping him think. The legal system moves slow. Federal investigations move slower. You could be fighting this for years. I don't have years. My kids are falling apart. Then you take the settlement. Move somewhere quiet. Start over. Nobody would blame you. Sarah watched him work the action on his weapon, smooth and practiced. Would you take it? No. Then don't suggest I do. The breakthrough came 2 days later when Agent Cortez called the secure line with news that made Sarah's hands shake. "We got him." Hendricks. He kept personal backups of every operation he authorized, including the fake intelligence reports. Everything's documented: communications, falsified tips, approval chains. It's enough to bring federal charges against the entire unit. Voss, who was listening on speaker, let out a breath. When? Arrest warrants are being issued now. Paulson, Hendricks, 3 other agents, and 2 supervisors at the regional office. They'll all be in custody by morning. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. And the other families? Once the arrests are public, the NDAs become unenforceable. They'll be free to speak, to join your lawsuit, to finally get justice. After Cortez hung up, Sarah sat in stunned silence. It was happening, really happening. The system that had tried to crush her was finally being held accountable. Don't celebrate yet, Voss warned. This is when they get desperate. She was right. The next morning, as federal agents were moving to arrest Hendricks at his home in Virginia, he barricaded himself inside and refused to come out. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live footage of armed standoff. Sarah watched on a borrowed laptop, Mathis beside her, both of them understanding what this meant. Hendricks wasn't going quietly. He was going to make this as messy and public as possible, and he was going to drag everyone down with him. He's going to name names, Mathis said quietly. Everyone who knew, everyone who helped. This is going to go all the way up the chain. Sarah's phone started ringing. Reporters wanting comment, other families wanting to know if this was real. Her own supervisor at the hospital calling to check on her, and then one call that made her blood run cold. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Sarah Brennan? A man's voice, rough, angry, familiar. Who is this? You destroyed my life. Her hand tightened on the phone. Paulson, everything I built, my career, my reputation, my family, gone. Because you couldn't just shut up and take the money. Mathis was already on his feet, gesturing for her to keep him talking while he called for a trace. You did this to yourself, Sarah said, forcing her voice to stay steady. You came to my house. You assaulted me. You terrorized my children. I was doing my job. Your job was to follow the law. You broke it. The law? Paulson laughed, bitter and sharp. The law is whatever people with power say it is. I had power. You had nothing, and you should have stayed nothing. Is that why you targeted me? Because I was supposed to be easy? You were supposed to be a message. Show everyone that fighting back doesn't work, that the system always wins. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. But you just had to be a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to be a victim. You think this is over? You think arresting a few agents changes anything? Paulson's breathing was getting faster, more erratic. The system protects itself. Always has. Always will. And when this is done, when the media moves on and everyone forgets, you'll still be looking over your shoulder. Your kids will still be afraid. And you'll realize you accomplished nothing except ruining your own life. You're wrong, am I? Look around, Sarah. Look at what fighting back has cost you. Your house destroyed, your kids traumatized, living in hiding with armed guards. Was it worth it? Sarah thought about Mia refusing to sleep alone, about Lucas jumping at loud noises, about the families who'd been too afraid to speak up until now, about every person who'd been crushed by the system because nobody had been willing to stand up and say enough. "Yes," she said quietly. "It was worth it." Silence on the other end. Then, "You're going to regret that." The line went dead. Mathis was already on the phone with local police, giving them the number to trace. But Sarah knew it wouldn't matter. Paulson was smart enough to use a burner phone from a location he'd already left. "He's spiraling," Mathis said after hanging up. "Dangerous. Let him spiral." Sarah, "I'm done being afraid of these people." She stood up, ignoring the pain in her shoulder, ignoring the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. "They wanted to make an example of me? Fine. I'll be an example, just not the kind they expected." The arrests happened that afternoon in a coordinated sweep across 3 states. Paulson was taken into custody outside his lawyer's office, surrounded by cameras. Hendricks was extracted from his house after a 6-hour standoff. The other agents and supervisors were arrested at work, at home, in front of families and colleagues. All of them charged with civil rights violations, conspiracy, falsifying federal documents, and abuse of authority. The news coverage was relentless. Every network led with the story. Social media exploded. The hashtag evolved from hashtag Justice for Brennan to hashtag Systemic Accountability. And through it all, Sarah stayed quiet. Let the facts speak for themselves. Let the system she'd forced into the light do its job. That night, alone in her temporary room while her kids slept down the hall and Mathis coordinated security outside, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. The fear, the anger, the bone-deep exhaustion of fighting a battle she'd never asked for. Her phone buzzed with a text from Voss. "You did it. All charges are sticking. Paulson's bail was denied. This is real." Sarah stared at the message for a long time. She should feel victorious, relieved, something positive. Instead, she just felt tired. Because Paulson had been right about one thing. This had cost her everything. Her sense of safety, her children's innocence, her ability to live a normal, quiet life. But he'd been wrong about the rest. It was worth it. Sarah was about to set her phone down when another text came through. Unknown number again. Different from the death threat. Different from Paulson's call. This one was just 2 words. "Found you." And then her phone died completely, screen going black like someone had remotely shut it down. In the hallway outside, she heard Mathis yell something sharp and urgent, then gunfire. Sarah hit the floor before her conscious mind registered what was happening. Old instincts took over. Flatten, assess, move. The gunfire wasn't random spray. 3 controlled bursts, professional spacing, suppressive fire meant to pin down the security detail outside. She crawled toward the bedroom where Mia and Lucas were sleeping, heart hammering so hard she could taste copper. Behind her, Mathis was shouting commands, coordinating response. More shots answered, different caliber, military precision returning fire. The bedroom door was locked from inside. Sarah rattled the handle. "Mia, open the door!" Nothing. Either the kids were too scared or couldn't hear over the gunfire. Sarah slammed her shoulder against the wood, ignoring the pain that screamed through her surgical scars. The door held. "Move!" Mathis appeared beside her, weapon drawn. He fired twice into the lock mechanism, then kicked. The door burst inward. Both kids were huddled in the closet. Mia's arms wrapped around Lucas. Her hand clamped over his mouth to keep him quiet. Their eyes were huge in the darkness. Sarah grabbed them both, pulling them close. "We're getting out, right now." Mathis was already on his radio. "Extraction point compromised. Need immediate evac. South exit. 2 civilians plus package." More gunfire outside. Closer now. Whoever had found them wasn't backing down. "How many?" Sarah asked. "At least 3 shooters. Professional setup. They cut the perimeter cameras before moving in." Mathis's face was grim. This wasn't opportunistic. They planned this. Sarah thought about the text message. "Found you." Someone had known exactly where they were, despite all the security, despite the classified location, which meant someone on the inside had talked. They moved through the house in tactical formation, Mathis leading, Sarah bringing up the rear with both kids pressed against her sides. Through the front window, Sarah could see muzzle flashes in the darkness, military police returning fire from covered positions. But the attackers had the advantage. They'd positioned themselves with clear lines of fire on both exits. South exit's blocked, Mathis said, reading something on his radio. They're trying to flush us toward the street where they have better coverage. Then we go through the basement. Sarah pointed toward a door she'd noticed earlier. These temporary quarters all have underground maintenance access, links to the main utility tunnels. You sure? I spent 18 months on forward bases. I know how military housing is built. Mathis didn't argue. They descended into darkness, Sarah using her phone's flashlight to navigate, even though she knew it might give away their position. Didn't matter. Staying put was death. The basement was exactly what she'd expected. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, metal door at the far end marked authorized personnel only. Mathis shot the lock and they pushed through into a narrow tunnel that stretched in both directions. Which way? He asked. Sarah closed her eyes, mentally mapping the base layout. East, toward the motor pool. More personnel, more witnesses. Harder to finish what they started. They ran. Behind them, Sarah heard the basement door crash open. Shouts echoed through the tunnel. Their attackers had followed. Mia was crying silently, tears streaming down her face as she ran. Lucas had gone completely quiet, the kind of traumatized silence that Sarah recognized from combat zones. Kids who'd seen too much, processed too fast, shut down to survive. The tunnel split 3 ways. Mathis chose left without hesitating, trusting Sarah's navigation. They emerged 2 minutes later through a service hatch into the motor pool garage where mechanics worked on military vehicles 24 hours a day. A staff sergeant looked up from an engine block, wrench in hand, confused by their sudden appearance. "Lock down the facility," Mathis barked, showing his rank insignia. "Armed intruders on base. Alert command." The sergeant's training kicked in. He hit an alarm button on the wall and the entire garage lit up red, sirens wailing. Within seconds, personnel were moving with organized urgency, securing entrances, drawing weapons. Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe, but only for a moment, because the 3 men who emerged from the tunnel entrance behind them weren't wearing military uniforms. They were dressed in civilian clothes, faces covered with black masks, weapons held with the easy confidence of people who'd done this before. They stopped when they saw the armed mechanics surrounding them. One of them slowly raised his hands, the other 2 followed. "On the ground," Mathis ordered. "Now!" They complied, moving with the practiced calm of professionals who knew they'd been caught but weren't worried about consequences. That confidence bothered Sarah more than if they'd panicked. Military police arrived 90 seconds later, securing the 3 men with efficient brutality. Sarah pulled Mia and Lucas into a side office, away from the chaos, away from the weapons and shouting and everything that would give them more nightmares. "Are we safe now?" Mia whispered. Sarah didn't know how to answer that. She settled for, "We're safer." Colonel Mathis appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, his expression dark. "They're not talking, won't identify themselves, won't say who sent them. But they're not amateurs, former military, based on how they moved, probably private contractors." "Hired by who?" "That's what we're going to find out." He crouched down to the kid's level. "Hey, you 2 were really brave in there. Your mom's lucky to have you." Lucas finally spoke, his voice tiny. "I want to go home." Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Because they didn't have a home anymore. Their house on Ashford Lane was a crime scene. This safe house had been compromised. Nowhere was actually safe. "Soon," she promised, knowing it was probably a lie. Agent Cortez arrived an hour later, moving fast, looking furious. She found Sarah in a conference room where Voss had set up a temporary command center. "The 3 men you caught," Cortez said without preamble. "They're registered employees of Sentinel Defense Solutions, private military contractor based in Virginia." Voss looked up from her laptop. "Doing what, exactly?" "Officially? Security consulting for high-net-worth individuals. Unofficially?" Cortez pulled up something on her tablet. "They've been linked to intimidation campaigns, witness tampering, evidence destruction. They work for people who need problems to disappear quietly." "Who hired them for this?" "We're still tracking the payment chain, but the contracts were negotiated through a shell company that's been used before by—" Cortez paused, checking her information again like she couldn't believe it. "By the same law firm representing Derek Paulson." The room went silent. You're saying Paulson ordered a hit on a federal witness? Voss's voice was carefully controlled. From inside a jail cell? Not directly, but someone in his network did. And they did it within hours of his arrest, which means this was planned in advance. Cortez sat down heavily. They knew you wouldn't settle. They knew you'd keep fighting. So they decided to eliminate the problem. Sarah felt cold spreading through her chest. They tried to kill my children. Yes. In a military facility, surrounded by armed personnel. Yes. Because I wouldn't shut up and disappear. Cortez met her eyes. Because you're dangerous to them. You're proof that the system can be held accountable, and they can't let that stand. Voss was already typing furiously. This changes everything. Attempted murder of a federal witness, conspiracy to obstruct justice, racketeering, we can bring RICO charges. This isn't just about civil rights anymore. This is organized criminal activity under color of law. How long until we can prove it? Sarah asked. Days. Maybe a week. Sentinel's financials are being subpoenaed now. Once we trace the money, we'll have everything. And until then? Nobody answered, because the truth was obvious. Until they had concrete proof Sarah and her kids were targets, and the people hunting them had unlimited resources, no conscience. The breakthrough came 3 days later when one of the captured contractors decided talking was preferable to federal prison. His lawyer negotiated a deal, full cooperation in exchange for immunity. What he revealed was worse than anyone expected. Paulson's operation hadn't been rogue. It had been sanctioned at the regional level by supervisors who saw aggressive enforcement as career advancement. They'd built a system where fabricating tips and conducting warrantless raids was standard procedure, where excessive force was quietly encouraged, where civil rights were treated as obstacles to efficiency. Dozens of families had been targeted. Most settled quietly. A few fought back and were crushed through legal intimidation. Those who persisted faced mysterious accidents, house fires, evidence that vanished from police custody. Sarah had survived because her military connections made her too visible to eliminate quietly, but that hadn't stopped them from trying. The contractor's testimony included names, dates, payment records, communications showing clear conspiracy between federal agents, supervisors, and private contractors to silence witnesses and destroy evidence. It was enough to bring federal racketeering charges against 17 people, including 3 regional directors who'd been insulated from accountability for years. The indictments were unsealed on a Tuesday morning. Sarah watched the news coverage from yet another secure location, Mathis and Voss flanking her like bodyguards. One by one, the architects of the corrupt system were arrested. Not quietly, not with negotiated surrenders. FBI agents raided their homes at dawn, cameras catching every moment. The same treatment they'd inflicted on innocent families was now turned against them. Derek Paulson's arraignment was particularly brutal. He stood before a federal judge facing 23 counts, including conspiracy, obstruction of justice, attempted murder of a witness, and civil rights violations. His lawyer argued for bail. The prosecutor presented evidence of the assassination attempt. Bail was denied. Paulson was led out of the courtroom in shackles, cameras tracking every step. His face was pale, hollow. The arrogance that had radiated from him on Sarah's driveway was completely gone. Sarah felt no satisfaction watching his downfall, just exhaustion, relief, and a deep, aching hope that maybe this time justice would actually stick. The other families started coming forward publicly. First 3, then 7, then 15, all of them with similar stories. Anonymous tips that led nowhere, destroyed homes, traumatized children, settlements that had kept them silent for years. Now they were loud. Margaret Voss consolidated their cases into a massive class action lawsuit seeking damages and structural reform. The demands were specific: mandatory warrant requirements, independent oversight for tactical operations, civilian review boards with real authority, public databases of settlements paid in civil rights cases. Not just punishment for the guilty. Systemic change so it couldn't happen again. The media ate it up. Congressional hearings were scheduled. The FBI director testified for 7 hours about institutional failures. The Attorney General announced a comprehensive review of enforcement procedures nationwide. Sarah watched it all unfold from the margins, still in protective custody, still waiting for the threat level to decrease enough that she could return to something resembling normal life. It took 4 weeks. 4 weeks of living in temporary housing while lawyers fought in courtrooms and investigators traced money through shell companies and journalists dug up decades of buried complaints. 4 weeks of Mia having nightmares every night and Lucas refusing to speak to anyone except Sarah. 4 weeks of holding her family together through sheer force of will. Finally, Agent Cortez called with the news Sarah had been waiting for. It's done. The entire network's been dismantled. Everyone involved is either in custody or cooperating. The contractors who came after you flipped on their employers. The payment chain is documented. You're safe. Sarah closed her eyes. You're sure? As sure as we can be. There's always risk, but the organized threat is neutralized. Cortez paused. Sarah, what you did, forcing this into the light, it's going to change how federal law enforcement operates. New policies are being written right now because of your case. I just wanted them to leave my family alone. I know, but you did more than that. You exposed a system that had been corrupting itself for years. That matters. After hanging up, Sarah sat in silence for a long time. Mia and Lucas were in the next room watching cartoons, the volume too loud, clinging to normal activities like lifelines. Mathias appeared in the doorway. I heard. You can go home now. I don't have a home. Your house on Ashford Lane. Repairs are finished. New door, new windows, new locks. The military covered it as part of witness protection expenses. He smiled slightly. Figured you'd earned it. Sarah thought about going back to that driveway, to the concrete where her blood had pooled, to the place where her children had learned that safety was an illusion. I'm not sure I can. Then don't. Sell it, move, start somewhere fresh. Mathis sat down across from her. But don't let them take that choice from you. Don't let fear dictate where you live. He was right. Sarah had fought too hard to give Paulson and his network that kind of power over her life. When can we leave? Whenever you're ready. The drive back to Ridgemont felt surreal. Sarah had been gone 5 weeks, but it felt like 5 years. Everything looked the same. The mountains in the distance, the familiar exit signs, the shopping centers where she'd bought groceries a lifetime ago. Ashford Lane was quiet when they pulled up. A few neighbors were outside, gardening or washing cars or doing the ordinary things that ordinary people did in ordinary suburbs. Several of them stopped to stare as the military vehicle parked in front of Sarah's house. Mr. Peterson walked over immediately, his wife trailing behind. Sarah, we've been worried sick. I know. I'm sorry we couldn't reach out. Are you? He gestured vaguely. Is it safe now? They tell me it is. Mrs. Peterson was already crying. We saw everything on the news, all those other families. We had no idea it was that bad. Sarah looked at her house. From the outside, it looked perfect. New door painted to match the old one, windows gleaming. The lawn had been maintained, probably by the same neighbors now gathering around her. But she knew what had happened inside those walls. Knew her children knew. Knew that walking back through that door would require more courage than she'd needed for anything else in this entire nightmare. Come on, guys, she said to Mia and Lucas. Let's go home. The interior was immaculate. Not just repaired, professionally cleaned. Someone had put the furniture back in place, hung the family photos back on the walls, even restocked the refrigerator. A note on the kitchen counter read, "Welcome back. Your friends at Ridgemont General." Mia walked through the rooms slowly, touching things like she was checking to make sure they were real. Lucas stayed pressed against Sarah's leg, not ready to separate yet. Is it really over? Mia asked. Sarah wanted to say yes. Wanted to promise that the bad men were gone forever, that they'd never be scared again, that life would go back to normal. But she'd learned something in the last 5 weeks. Learned it in war zones and hospital ERs in her own driveway while her children screamed. Safety was something you fought for. Justice was something you demanded. Normal was something you rebuilt piece by piece from the wreckage. The people who hurt us are gone, Sarah said carefully. But it's okay if you're still scared. It's okay if this doesn't feel like home right away. We'll figure it out together. Lucas finally looked up at her. Can I sleep in your room tonight? Yeah, baby. Both of you can. They spent the rest of the day slowly reclaiming their space, unpacking the few belongings they'd been able to take to protective custody, testing whether the rooms felt safe or dangerous, learning to exist in a place that had been violated but was still theirs. That evening, after the kids were finally asleep in her bed, Sarah stood on the front porch looking at the driveway. Someone had pressure washed the concrete. The bloodstains were gone, but she could still see them, would probably always see them. Her phone rang. Voss. The settlement offers started coming in. Every family in the class action. Numbers are substantial. How substantial? Voss named a figure that made Sarah's breath catch. Enough to never worry about money again, enough to give Mia and Lucas opportunities she'd never dreamed of. Enough to disappear if that's what they needed. There's a catch, Voss continued. The defendants want to resolve this before trial. They're offering full financial compensation in exchange for avoiding criminal prosecution on some of the lesser charges. Which charges? The supervisors who enabled Paulson but didn't directly participate. The administrators who ignored complaints. Basically, everyone except the core conspirators. Voss paused. The core group, Paulson, Hendricks, the contractors, they're going to prison regardless. This is about how many others go down with them. Sarah thought about all the families who'd been terrorized, about the systemic rot that had allowed this to fester for years, about whether letting some perpetrators walk was worth the guaranteed justice for the worst offenders. What do you recommend? Honestly, take it. The money will change your life and the lives of 14 other families. The main conspirators still face decades in prison, and the policy changes we demanded are already being implemented nationwide. Voss's voice softened. You won, Sarah. Don't sacrifice your family's future trying to punish every person who was ever complicit. Sarah knew Voss was right, but accepting felt like compromise, like letting part of the corrupt system survive. I need to think about it. Take your time. We have 72 hours to respond. After hanging up, Sarah went back inside and checked on the kids, both sleeping finally. Mia's arm thrown over Lucas, protective even in sleep. Whatever Sarah decided would affect them most, their education, their therapy, their ability to recover from trauma, was her need for absolute justice worth potentially sacrificing their future? The next morning, Sarah called Voss back. I'll take the settlement on one condition. Name it. Every administrator who ignored complaints, every supervisor who enabled the abuse, their names go into a public database. No NDAs, no sealed records. Anyone searching for information about federal misconduct can see exactly who failed to act. They'll fight that. Then they don't get a deal. Voss was quiet for a moment. You know what? I think we can make that work. Public accountability in exchange for avoiding prosecution. It's not prison, but it's permanent consequence. That's what I want. Make them live with what they did. The final settlement was reached 2 weeks later. $8 million split among the families. Criminal convictions for Paulson, Hendricks, and 6 others ranging from 15 to 25 years in federal prison. And a public database documenting every administrator and supervisor who'd enabled the abuse, permanently searchable, forever attached to their names. Not perfect justice, but real justice. The kind that actually changed things. The media covered the settlement extensively. Sarah did one final interview, carefully controlled by Voss, where she thanked the people who'd supported her and urged other victims of law enforcement abuse to speak up. The system only works if we force it to, she said into the camera. If we stay silent because we're scared, nothing changes. But if we stand up, if we demand accountability, if we refuse to be intimidated, then maybe the people who are supposed to protect us will actually do their jobs. The clip went viral. Millions of views, countless shares. Other victims in other cities started coming forward with their own stories. Sarah had become something she never wanted to be. A symbol, a rallying point, proof that fighting back could actually work. But she was also still just a mom trying to help her kids heal. Still a nurse who needed to decide whether to go back to the ER or find work somewhere that didn't remind her of trauma. Still a woman with surgical scars and PTSD, and a house that sometimes still didn't feel safe, even though all the locks had been changed. 3 months after the settlement, Sarah returned to work at Ridgemont General. Dr. Hammond welcomed her back personally. No questions about whether she was ready, no pressure to perform. Just, your locker's waiting, your shifts are yours whenever you want them. The first night back was brutal. Every overhead page made her flinch. Every raised voice made her scan for exits. But she pushed through, falling back on the same instincts that had kept her alive overseas. You did the job. You kept people alive. Everything else was just noise. Her coworkers treated her differently now. Some with awe, some with pity, some avoiding her entirely like trauma was contagious. Sarah hated all of it. She just wanted to work, to feel useful, to reclaim some piece of the life Paulson had tried to destroy. 2 weeks into her return, Sarah was restocking a supply closet when she heard shouting from the ambulance bay. She stepped out to see paramedics rushing in with a patient on a gurney, someone screaming incoherently, hospital security trying to control the situation. The patient was a young man, maybe late 20s, handcuffed to the gurney, with federal agents flanking the paramedics. Sarah's chest tightened. Different agents, different circumstances. But the configuration was too familiar. Authorities with too much power, patient who couldn't defend himself, system that allowed abuse to masquerade as procedure. She watched the intake for a moment, watched the agents treating the paramedics like servants, watched them dismiss the charge nurse's questions about whether the handcuffs were medically necessary. And something in Sarah decided enough was enough. She walked over. "I'm taking this patient." The lead agent looked at her like she was a piece of furniture that had started talking. "That's not how this works." "Actually, it is. Hospital policy says medical staff determine treatment protocols, not law enforcement. And I'm determining that those handcuffs need to come off so we can properly assess his injuries. He's in federal custody. He's in my ER. Your authority ends at that door." Sarah pointed toward the entrance. "You can wait outside or you can stand quietly in the corner, but you will not interfere with medical care." The agent's face flushed red. "Do you know who I am?" Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I don't care who you are. Remove the handcuffs or leave." For a moment, the agent looked like he might refuse, might pull rank, might threaten, might do all the things Paulson had done. But he'd clearly seen the news, recognized Sarah's face, understood that picking a fight with the woman who'd already destroyed one federal operation was a losing proposition. He removed the handcuffs. Sarah treated the patient, dehydrated, malnourished, evidence of previous injuries consistent with poor custody conditions, and documented everything meticulously. When she was done, she made copies of her notes and handed them directly to the hospital's legal department with a recommendation for reporting the conditions to federal oversight authorities. The agents left without incident. Dr. Hammond found Sarah in the break room an hour later. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen you do. I'm not sure which." He needed help. They were preventing that. Someone had to say something. Most people wouldn't have. "I'm not most people anymore." Hammond studied her for a long moment. "No, I guess you're not." Later that night, after her shift, Sarah drove home through the quiet streets of Ridgemont. The settlement money was sitting in an account she hadn't touched yet, earning interest, waiting for decisions about the future. College funds for the kids. Therapy bills. Maybe eventually a new house in a new city where nobody knew their story. But not yet. Because leaving felt like running, and Sarah was done running. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the truck for a moment, looking at the house where everything had changed, where federal agents had tried to break her and failed, where her children had learned that their mother wouldn't stay down no matter how hard the system pushed. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. "Thank you for what you did. For all of us. Family." Number 4 from the lawsuit. Sarah saved the message, added it to the dozens of others she'd received from families who'd finally gotten justice because she'd refused to settle quietly. She hadn't wanted to be a hero, hadn't wanted national attention or media coverage or any of this, but she'd taken what they'd tried to do to her and turned it into something that mattered, had forced a corrupt system to acknowledge its failures, had protected her children by teaching them that fighting back was possible. Inside, Mia and Lucas were waiting, homework spread across the kitchen table, TV playing too loud, normal chaos of normal kids in a normal house. Almost normal. Sarah walked through the door, and both of them looked up. "Hey, Mom," Mia said. "How was work?" Sarah thought about the young patient in handcuffs, about standing up to federal agents again, about proving that what Paulson had done to her hadn't broken her. It had just shown her exactly how strong she could be when she had to. "It was fine," she said. "Just another day." But across town, in a federal prison cell, Derek Paulson sat alone reviewing case documents his lawyer had brought. The appeals were going nowhere. The evidence was overwhelming. He was looking at 20 years minimum. And in those documents, he found something that made his blood run cold. Sarah's full military record had been unsealed as part of the trial discovery. the classified missions, the casualty lists, the commendations. But buried in the file was one detail his lawyer had highlighted in red. Sarah Brennan had been the combat medic who'd kept Senator Morrison's son alive after a helicopter crash in Kandahar. The same senator who now sat on the Senate Judiciary Committee. The same senator who'd personally called the Attorney General demanding maximum prosecution of everyone involved in Sarah's assault. Paulson stared at the document, finally understanding why the entire system had turned against him so completely. He hadn't just attacked a random nurse. He'd attacked someone who'd saved the life of one of the most powerful men in government, and that man had made it his personal mission to ensure Paulson paid for it. The realization hit Paulson like physical force. He dropped the document, hands shaking, understanding finally why every appeal had been denied, why judges who normally showed leniency had thrown the book at him, why the system he'd served for years had turned on him with such brutal efficiency. He'd attacked the woman who'd saved a senator's only son. His lawyer noticed the change in his expression. "You see it now. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Would it have changed anything? Would you have pleaded differently if you'd known?" The lawyer gathered his papers. "You're going to serve every day of that sentence, Derek. There's no political will to help you, no bureaucratic sympathy. You picked the wrong target, and now you're paying for it." After the lawyer left, Paulson sat alone in his cell and finally understood what Sarah had tried to tell him on her driveway. "You came to the wrong house. Not just wrong in the sense of mistaken identity, wrong in every possible way." He'd looked at an exhausted nurse in a gray hoodie and seen weakness, saw someone who could be pushed around, intimidated, forgotten, never bothered to check who she actually was, what she'd done, who she'd saved. The arrogance of it made him sick now. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter forwarded through Margaret Voss's office. Prison stationery. Paulson's handwriting. She almost threw it away without reading it, almost denied him even that small satisfaction, but something made her open it. The letter was short. No excuses, no self-pity, just 3 sentences. "I was wrong about everything. I'm sorry." Sarah read it twice, then set it on fire in her kitchen sink and watched the paper curl into ash. His apology meant nothing, changed nothing, but seeing it burn felt like closing a door that had been open too long. Mia walked in while Sarah was washing the ashes down the drain. "What was that?" "Nothing important." "Looked like something." Sarah dried her hands, studying her daughter. 9 years old when this started. 10 now. Still too young to fully understand everything that had happened, but old enough to know their lives had been split into before and after. "Remember how you asked if we were safe?" Mia nodded. "We are. The people who hurt us are gone. Really gone this time." Sarah pulled out a chair, sitting down so they were eye level. "But I need you to understand something. Being safe doesn't mean nothing bad will ever happen again. It means knowing you can survive when it does. Like you did. Like we all did. You and Lucas and me. Together." Mia was quiet for a moment. "My teacher says you're a hero. I'm not. She says you stood up to bad people and won. I stood up because I had to. That's different than being a hero." Sarah brushed hair from Mia's face. "Heroes are people who choose danger. I just chose to not let danger choose me." "That sounds like the same thing." Sarah smiled despite herself. "Maybe when you're older, you'll explain the difference to me." Lucas appeared in the doorway, backpack dragging. "Mom, can we get pizza tonight?" "Sure, baby." "The good kind? With extra cheese?" "The good kind." He grinned and disappeared back toward his room. Sarah watched him go, grateful he could still ask for pizza like it was the most important thing in the world, that both her kids were slowly remembering how to be children instead of survivors. The healing wasn't linear. Some days were good. Some days Lucas still woke up screaming from nightmares. Some days Mia refused to go to school because what if something happened while she was gone? Some days Sarah had to pull over while driving because a black SUV got too close behind her and panic shut down her ability to function. But the good days were starting to outnumber the bad. 2 weeks after burning Paulson's letter, Sarah received a different kind of correspondence. Official envelope, Senate letterhead. She opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy paper. "Captain Brennan, I learned recently that you're the medic who saved my son's life in Kandahar. Michael has spoken of you often over the years. The woman who kept him breathing for 4 hours under fire while waiting for evac. He's a father now himself, married, building a life he wouldn't have without you. I also learned what federal agents did to you and your family. The attack on your home. The assault. The trauma inflicted on your children. Please know that I have personally ensured every person responsible faces maximum consequences. But that's not enough. Nothing can undo what was done to you. So I want to offer something that might help move forward, a position on the newly formed Federal Law Enforcement Oversight Commission. We need people who understand both sides, who've served with honor and been failed by the system, who have the courage to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. No pressure, no expectations, just an opportunity if you want it. Senator James Morrison. Sarah read the letter 3 times. A position on a federal commission, real authority to change how law enforcement operated, a chance to make sure what happened to her never happened to anyone else. Or she could decline, could stay in Ridgemont, work her shifts at the ER, raise her kids away from the spotlight, live the quiet life she'd wanted before all this started. She called Voss. Did you know about this? The senator reached out to me last week asking for your contact information. I gave it to him. Why? Sarah explained the offer. Voss was silent for a long moment. What are you thinking? Voss asked finally. I'm thinking I spent 4 years trying to be invisible, trying to live small, and it didn't protect me. They came anyway. So what's your instinct? Sarah looked around her kitchen, at the place where federal agents had dumped her drawers and scattered her life. At the home she'd reclaimed inch by inch, making it safe again through sheer determination. My instinct is that being small didn't work. Maybe being loud will. She accepted the position 3 days later. The appointment required Senate confirmation, which meant another round of testimony, more media coverage, more strangers picking apart her life. But this time Sarah walked into the hearing room with her head high, Colonel Mathis seated directly behind her, Voss at her side. The questions came rapid fire. Senators probing her qualifications, her military record, her intentions. Some were genuinely curious, others were hostile, clearly uncomfortable with someone who'd sued the federal government, now being given authority over it. Senator Morrison led the questioning. Captain Brennan, some of my colleagues are concerned that your personal experience might make you biased against law enforcement. How do you respond? Sarah leaned toward the microphone. I'm not biased against law enforcement. I'm biased against abuse of power. There's a difference. Most officers do their jobs with integrity. The system fails when we protect the ones who don't. And you believe you can be objective? Can judge cases fairly even when they involve federal agents? I believe I can judge cases based on evidence and law, which is what this position requires. My experience doesn't make me biased. It makes me informed. Another senator jumped in, but surely someone with less personal involvement would be more impartial. With respect, Senator, impartiality isn't the same as ignorance. Sarah kept her voice level. I know what it's like when the system works correctly because I served within it for years. And I know what it's like when the system fails because I lived through that too. Both perspectives matter. The hearing lasted 4 hours. By the end, Sarah was exhausted, her shoulder aching from sitting rigid in the uncomfortable chair. But she'd held her ground, answered every question, made it clear she understood exactly what she was taking on. The confirmation vote was closer than expected, 54 to 46. But it passed. Sarah Brennan was officially a federal commissioner with authority to investigate law enforcement misconduct, recommend policy changes, and oversee implementation of reforms nationwide. The irony wasn't lost on her. 6 months ago, federal agents had brutalized her on her own driveway. Now she had authority over the very system that had tried to destroy her. The first commission meeting was held in Washington, in a conference room that probably cost more than Sarah's annual salary. 20 commissioners from various backgrounds, former judges, civil rights attorneys, community advocates, retired law enforcement, all of them appointed to rebuild trust between police and the communities they served. Sarah was the only one who'd been directly victimized by the system she was now tasked with reforming. The chairman opened the meeting with bureaucratic pleasantries. Then he turned the floor over to commissioners for initial statements. Sarah waited until everyone else had spoken. When it was finally her turn, she stood up. I didn't want this position. I didn't want any of this. 6 months ago, I was a nurse who just wanted to clean her truck and spend time with her kids. Then federal agents destroyed my life based on a fake tip they never bothered to verify. Sarah paused, making eye contact with each person in the room. But here's what I learned. Staying silent doesn't keep you safe. Being compliant doesn't protect you. Sometimes the only way to survive is to fight back. She pulled out a folder containing documentation from her case, copies of the falsified intelligence reports, photos of her injuries, statements from the other families who'd been targeted. This is what happens when law enforcement operates without oversight. When agents know they can act with impunity because the system protects itself before it protects citizens. When career advancement depends on aggressive tactics instead of constitutional compliance. Sarah set the folder on the table. We have a choice. We can write policies that sound good but change nothing, or we can build accountability that actually works, that scares bad cops more than it inconveniences good ones. An older commissioner, former police chief, spoke up. With all due respect, Captain, you're advocating for restrictions that will make law enforcement's job harder. Good. If following the Constitution makes your job harder, maybe you're doing your job wrong. The room went silent. Then another commissioner started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined. Not everyone, but enough. The chairman cleared his throat. I think we have some work to do. Over the following months, Sarah threw herself into the commission's work. She reviewed cases, interviewed victims, studied data on law enforcement tactics across the country. She pushed for policies requiring warrant verification, independent investigation of excessive force complaints, public databases of misconduct settlements. She met resistance at every turn, from police unions who saw her as anti-cop, from politicians who worried about appearing soft on crime, from bureaucrats who preferred the old system where problems could be buried quietly. Sarah didn't care. She'd already lost everything once. There was nothing left they could threaten her with. At one particularly contentious meeting, a police union representative accused her of grandstanding. You're using your personal trauma to attack an entire profession. Sarah looked at him calmly. I'm using my experience to fix a broken system. If you feel attacked by accountability, that says more about you than me. You don't understand the pressures officers face. I understand that pressure doesn't justify violating constitutional rights. I worked under fire in combat zones where the enemy was actively trying to kill us, and we still followed rules of engagement. Street cops can follow the Fourth Amendment. The policies started passing. Slowly at first, then with increasing momentum as other commissioners saw Sarah wasn't backing down. Within a year, 12 states had adopted the commission's recommended reforms. Body camera requirements became standard. Civilian review boards gained real authority. The database of misconduct settlements went public, making it impossible for problem officers to quietly move between departments. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Sarah still worked at Ridgemont General 2 days a week. She needed that connection to medicine, to the hands-on work of saving lives instead of just writing policies. Dr. Hammond accommodated her schedule without complaint, grateful to have her at all. One evening, Sarah was finishing a shift when a familiar face appeared in the ER. Michael Morrison, Senator Morrison's son, wearing civilian clothes but with the bearing of someone who'd served in uniform. He recognized her immediately. Captain Brennan? Sarah blinked. Michael? I heard you were working here. I hope it's okay that I... He stopped, emotion crossing his face. I needed to thank you, in person, for Kandahar. Sarah felt her throat tighten. You don't need to thank me. I was doing my job. You saved my life, kept me breathing for 4 hours while under fire. My dad told me you're the reason I'm alive to see my daughter's 2nd birthday next week. His eyes were bright. So yeah, I do need to thank you. They talked for 20 minutes, about what he remembered from that day, fragments mostly, pain and fear, and Sarah's voice telling him to stay with her, keep breathing, help was coming. About his life now, the family he'd built, the normal existence he'd never take for granted. My dad said you're changing the system, Michael said finally, making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to others. Trying to. That matters, more than you know. He shook her hand, formal and sincere. Thank you, Captain, for everything. After he left, Sarah sat in the break room for a long time, thinking about connection and consequence, about how saving one life in Kandahar had led to a senator protecting her when she needed it most, which had led to her position on the commission, which was now changing policies that would protect thousands of families. You never knew which moments would matter, which decisions would ripple outward in ways you couldn't predict. 6 months later, Sarah was invited to speak at a national conference on criminal justice reform. The audience was enormous. Attorneys, activists, law enforcement officials, victims advocates, people who dedicated their lives to fixing the system. Sarah walked onto the stage without notes. She'd learned that prepared speeches felt artificial. The truth worked better raw. My name is Sarah Brennan. A year ago, federal agents assaulted me on my driveway in front of my children based on intelligence they never verified. They had no warrant, no probable cause, no legal justification. They just assumed I was guilty and acted accordingly. Sarah paused, letting that sink in. I fought back. Not because I'm brave, not because I'm special, but because I had nothing left to lose. She told the story. The whole story. The raid, the blood, Mia's screams, the military vehicles arriving just in time, the death threats and assassination attempt, the legal battle that exposed systematic corruption, the settlement that came with the cost of going public. Here's what I want you to understand, Sarah continued. The system only works when we force it to, when we refuse to stay quiet because it's easier, when we demand accountability even when it's uncomfortable. Every person who settles silently, every family who takes money to disappear, every victim who's too scared to speak up, they're making a rational choice in an irrational system. I don't blame them. She gripped the podium, but I'm asking you to be irrational. I'm asking you to fight back even when it's hard, to document everything, to refuse settlements with NDAs, to make noise until someone listens. Because the only reason I'm standing here instead of buried in a quiet payout is that I got lucky. I had military connections and media attention, and a senator who owed me a debt. Most people don't. The audience was completely silent. So use my story, share it. Point to it when people say fighting the system doesn't work. Prove that accountability is possible. And if it happens to you, if law enforcement violates your rights, remember that staying silent keeps you safe in the short term, but changes nothing in the long term. We have to be willing to risk something to fix this. The applause started before she finished her last sentence. Standing ovation, hundreds of people on their feet. Sarah stepped away from the podium and walked off stage, past organizers trying to get her attention, past reporters wanting quotes. She'd said what she needed to say. That evening, back in her hotel room, Sarah video called home. Mia answered, Lucas's face appearing beside hers on the screen. How was your speech? Mia asked. Good. Exhausting. How was school? Boring. Lucas got in trouble for talking during math. Did not. Did too, Mom. The teacher sent a note. Sarah let them argue, just grateful to hear their voices. Grateful they could bicker about normal things like school behavior instead of nightmares and safety protocols. I'll be home tomorrow, Sarah said when they'd finished squabbling. We'll get pizza, the good kind. With extra cheese? Lucas asked hopefully. With extra cheese. After hanging up, Sarah stood at the hotel window looking out at the city lights. Washington, D.C. at night, monuments illuminated, power concentrated in buildings she could see from where she stood. A year ago, she'd been nobody, just a nurse in a small Colorado town trying to live quietly. Now she was someone who testified before Congress, who wrote policies that changed how police operated nationwide, who gave speeches that inspired other victims to fight back. She hadn't wanted any of this, would have given it all up to go back to that Saturday morning before the SUVs arrived, to cleaning her truck while her kids played inside, to the simple peace of being invisible. But she couldn't go back, could only move forward, could only take the platform they'd inadvertently given her and use it to fix the system that had broken her. Her phone buzzed. Text from Margaret Voss. You were incredible today. Proud of you. Another from Colonel Mathis. Morrison's office called. They want you to brief the Armed Services Committee on military-civilian law enforcement cooperation. I told them you'd think about it. Another from Agent Cortez. 3 more families came forward today citing your speech as the reason they're finally reporting misconduct. This is working. Sarah read the messages and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, not satisfaction. Something quieter and more lasting. Purpose. The next morning, Sarah flew home to Ridgemont. Mia and Lucas were waiting at the airport, Colonel Mathis behind them keeping watch out of habit. Both kids crashed into her with enough force to make her stumble. I missed you, Mia said into her shoulder. Missed you too, baby. Lucas was already talking rapid fire about something that happened at school, words tumbling over each other in his excitement. Sarah caught maybe half of it but smiled anyway, just grateful he felt safe enough to be this loud and enthusiastic. They drove home through familiar streets, past the hospital where she'd worked for years, past the neighborhoods where people recognized her now, some waving, others staring, past the diner where she'd met with Cortez and learned just how deep the corruption went. Ashford Lane looked the same. Houses with perfect lawns, kids' bikes and driveways. The ordinariness of suburban life continuing despite everything that had happened here. Sarah pulled into her driveway and stared at the concrete. Someone had painted over the area where her blood had stained. She hadn't asked them to do it, but she was grateful anyway. You okay, Mom? Mia asked quietly. Sarah looked at her daughter in the rearview mirror. 10 years old now, growing up faster than Sarah wanted, learning lessons about justice and power that no child should have to learn, but also learning that fighting back was possible, that being small and quiet and compliant didn't keep you safe, that sometimes the only way to protect yourself was to stand up and refuse to be moved. Yeah, Sarah said, I'm okay. They went inside together. Lucas already raiding the refrigerator, Mia disappearing to her room to finish homework. Normal chaos, normal life, normal everything except for the fact that Sarah now had federal authority and national recognition and a platform she'd never asked for but refused to waste. That evening, after the kids were asleep, Sarah sat on her porch in the darkness. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, easy to forget that violence had erupted here not so long ago. But Sarah didn't want to forget, couldn't afford to, because the moment she got comfortable, the moment she assumed the system had really changed, was the moment it would revert to its worst instincts. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Captain Brennan? This is Maria Rodriguez. You don't know me, but I saw your speech yesterday, and I need help. Sarah sat up straighter. What happened? Police raided my house 3 weeks ago. Wrong address, no warrant. They beat my husband in front of our kids. The department's saying we're lying, that we matched a suspect description, but we didn't, and I can prove it, and her voice broke. I don't know what to do. But you said to fight back, so I'm calling. Sarah grabbed a pen. Tell me everything, from the beginning, every detail. She took notes for 40 minutes, documented the timeline, the injuries, the false justifications. By the time Rodriguez finished, Sarah had enough to open an investigation through the commission. I'll look into this, Sarah promised. Get you connected with lawyers. Make sure your case doesn't get buried. Thank you. Thank you so much. I was so scared to call, but you did the right thing. Being scared and doing it anyway? That's courage. After hanging up, Sarah sat with her notes in the darkness. This was her life now. Taking calls from victims who'd heard her story and found the strength to tell their own. Using her authority to open doors that had been closed to them. Building the accountability system she'd wished existed when Paulson's team had destroyed her driveway. It was exhausting, painful, required reliving her own trauma every time she heard a new story. But it mattered. And mattering was better than being safe, better than being invisible, better than living small and hoping violence would pass you by. Sarah looked up at the stars above her Colorado suburb. Somewhere in a federal prison, Derek Paulson was serving his sentence. Somewhere in Washington, policies she'd helped write were being implemented. Somewhere across the country, families who'd been terrorized were finding the courage to speak up because she'd shown them it was possible. She wasn't a hero, would never accept that label. Heroes chose danger for noble reasons. Sarah had just been a woman who refused to be destroyed, who looked at a system designed to break her and decided to break it first, who turned her victimization into ammunition and her anger into action. She'd been underestimated her entire life. Too soft, too kind, too small to be dangerous. They'd learned better. The system had learned better. And every victim who called her, every family who filed complaints instead of settling quietly, every officer who thought twice before violating rights because accountability now actually existed, they were all proof that one person standing up could change everything. Sarah went inside and locked the door behind her. Checked on both kids one more time. Mia sprawled across her bed with a book on her chest. Lucas curled up with his stuffed dog, finally able to sleep without nightmares. They were healing, Slowly, imperfectly, but healing. And tomorrow Sarah would go back to the ER, would save lives with her hands instead of policy papers, would be just a nurse again for a few hours before returning to Washington for another commission hearing. She'd been broken on this driveway, had bled on this concrete, had watched her children learn that the people supposed to protect them could also destroy them. But she hadn't stayed broken. She'd rebuilt herself into something stronger, something the system couldn't silence or intimidate or buy off, something dangerous in all the right ways. Sarah Brennan had been nobody special, just an exhausted nurse trying to clean her truck on a Saturday morning. Then they came for her, and discovered that nobody special could become everyone's worst nightmare if you pushed them far enough. The lesson had cost them everything. Prison sentences, destroyed careers, systematic reforms that would prevent others from abusing power the way they had. It was a lesson Sarah hoped they'd remember. But if they didn't, if some other agent in some other city decided constitutional rights were optional and victims were disposable, Sarah would be waiting, with documentation, with legal authority, with a national platform and absolutely nothing left to lose. They'd given her power by trying to take everything away. Now she was never giving it back.